I want to start with one question, a quick question, and ask for a quick answer. If we have a look at energy consumption, and the city, I mean, we had now an oil price of over $100 crude oil for more than a year. That is significantly higher than it was the years before. Do you think that has changed anything in the cities? On the structure of cities, so what you guys were talking about, did the energy price have an impact so far? Maybe we can. You have to share the microphone. There's one. Yeah. Okay.
What we observe in Vienna, not only in Vienna, is a not dramatic but a huge shift in transportation. So public transportation are going up. A lot of people change from cars because they can't afford it. To fill up a car is really expensive now. And the bicycles is going up all over Europe, all over the world. I think also in a lot of United States, South America. I'm not so familiar with Asia. And the more important trend is that people from young people, for centuries had the concept, when I get a baby, I have to go to suburbia because my baby needs some garden. That's not over, but we have a trend back to the cities, and we can count that. The big problem is what you approached, is the pricing of living in the cities, but this is a long story.
I don't think I have very much to add. We're seeing the same thing in Italy. Reduction in traffic, a tendency to go back to the city centers, more or less, as you said.
Well, I haven't mentioned this, but partners of ours from St. Gallen also carried out a survey on the acceptance of renewable energy sources in the region, and we were quite surprised how big the acceptance actually is. I think this has also something to do with the rising energy price, of course. This is one aspect. The other is, of course, the financial incentives that of course exist. But I think one cannot isolate one from the other. Mm.
But what does it mean? I mean, you mentioned it before, Christoph, the relation between urban and rural areas. I mean, we have people living in rural areas. There's not this density, and your project, Hans Martin. I mean, that's not just urban, to be honest. I mean, how will that change in a post-oil area?
I think we have to define a third area. It's not only cities and rural. Sorry for this German word now. It was Tom Sievert who developed Zwischenstadt. That's not rural, that's not urban. This is something in between, the in-between area. And I think this in-between area, these suburban areas, which are not only single houses, is also industries, shopping centers. When you approach a new city, what you see there, it looks similar all over the world. If you are in Vienna, or in Vladivostok, or in Saigon, or in Puerto Rico, wherever. Shopping center, gasoline station, maybe a hotel, maybe shopping area, things like that. The positive image is they are built just to last for 20 years. After 20 years, they are ruined. And I think one of the big areas we discuss is transformation. These areas will look completely different in 20 years, regardless the oil price. If the oil price still goes up, I think they will change more quickly. Beside that, we can also speak about aesthetics. And maybe the livable city is not only post-oil and sustainable, maybe it's a good place to stay, a good place to open a restaurant. You never will open a restaurant, a successful restaurant in this kind of Zwischenstadt.
But you don't have to owe a restaurant. So, so any further comments from you?
Yes. Well, it's good that you mentioned the Zwischenstadt debate. Well, actually, before I came into energy research, I was doing research in the field of, well, land consumption. I was also always critical about this Zwischenstadt phenomenon. But, well, I have to admit, if you have a look at the, well, energy balance, and if you take into account not just the consumption, but also the generation potential, the picture gets a little bit blurry, because it's easier to generate renewable energy if the density is not so extremely high as in Manhattan. And I combined with the fact that these areas are also, well, rejuvenating faster than the city centers, that may be a chance for an enhancement of these structures.
Okay, thank you.
And this is, of course, especially for the Lake Constance Alpine Energy region, a very good message.
Any response from you, Ugo?
Well, I think it's a very interesting subject, because you see, there is this big problem with oil prices going up. It's not just price of gasoline or diesel fuel that goes up. It's the whole system, the whole fabric of society, which is under stress. And this stress takes several forms: economic crisis, and that reflects on the housing market, as you all know. So I think it's everywhere in Europe. I don't know how it is in Vienna, but we have a huge number of empty buildings, which I figure is typical. You look perplexed, and it's a miracle if you don't have them in Vienna. We have empty buildings, people, homeless people at the same time. It is a fantastic failure of the invisible hand, if you allow me, because I can't understand how. No, I understand in a way, but probably you too, you understand. But you have the same point: empty buildings and people living in trailers or under bridges, really. So you have this problem, and it's an urban problem. Somehow we have it will have to be solved in some way, but the system is not adapting easily. The system was not built to give good housing to everybody at low prices. It was built for profit of mainly banks and people who own large number of buildings. So the system is fighting a change, and it's interesting to see. I have no idea how it will evolve in principle. Maybe you could tell something about this point.
Well, now we are deep in also social debate. What we are trying to change is a development which took place in a lot of cities or areas the last 50, 60 years. The last 50, 60, 70 years, we whether built offices or we built houses to live in, flats. And I think we should stop building these structures which only fulfill one use. So the house I showed you where I live in, that could be an office, that could be a flat, that could be a kindergarten, that could be for oil drum office. It could be anything. We should start reinventing building houses which could be used for different purposes. So it's ridiculous that we have a shortage of flats in Vienna and an overload of offices. Why not build a house which can be an office? What's an office in future? We open a computer, I would say 70% of that, we open a computer and take a phone and talk. Yeah? This is 70% of the work being done in cities. I think we need to reinvent these mixed structures. It could be a solution. And then we could discuss this in other, just very short remark. Justice in the city has a lot to do with with affordable transportation without being forced to use a car. I think this is not only from an environmental and resource perspective, but also from a perspective of justice, a very important issue.
Thank you. I just want to have a look if there's any reflection from the audience. Yes, over there.
Yeah, I like your idea of having like one stage of one level for office, one level for living, office living. In Italy, they invented something for that, but it was kept only in the field of cooking, and they call it lasagna. But it's a nice idea. I had one question for Ugo Bardi. Do you agree with the idea of applying the notion of entropy to the dispersion of metals? The fact that we take metals in mines, sometimes we use them to build something, and then it's recyclable and it's okay. But sometimes it's put in painting, for example, so it's spread over, and it's impossible to put the atoms together again. And in this case, Georges Corrigan, I think, used this parallel. He said that entropy has increased because there's dispersion of the atoms. And do you agree with this idea of entropy, of this use?
Yeah, eventually everything is driven by entropy. It's not a problem, but it's not so bad as it was. If there were no sun, then entropy on this planet would reach a maximum, and in a while we're all dead, which will happen anyway, but hopefully in a certain time. But we have the possibility to recycle metals. We cannot probably do that at levels of production of today. So you can make a calculation that today we produce about 15 million tons of copper every year. So that comes from mines mainly. Plus there is the recycled copper, that's another story. Now this ecosystem also uses copper in roots of plants, and plants use copper for metabolism, and then it goes, you have a little bit of copper inside your body. So the question is, if you were to do like plants, how much copper could you cycle into the system? Unfortunately, the answer is that the amount is very small. I made this calculation. You will excuse me if I don't remember exactly the number, but it's a factor of 100 less than what we are doing now, producing now. So we need to structure our system over a use of copper which is about 100 times less, which is not impossible. We have to be very careful on how to use copper, and but we'll never run out of copper. Eventually, we can recover it from the sea or from biological accumulation processes. Some plants can accumulate minerals, so we could use that as a way to get to close the cycle. The cycle can be closed if you have energy, but unfortunately on amounts which are much smaller, sometimes like homeopathic amounts of metal. So we have to rethink the way we manufacture things.
Okay, thank you. One final statement before we close the session. Yeah.
I am very glad that we have a kind of down-to-earth discussion here. So I would like to ask one observation, one question. Where do you think will be the jobs in the, let's say, later post-peak age in the cities? Yeah, because many people really get jobs from this global economics, yeah, and also financials. And we probably suspect that these are not really growth fields in the post-peak future. So this is one. And the observation, actually, I live in Prague, which is kind of similar to Vienna in some. I think Vienna is more successful, but whatever. But we have, let's say, a problem now with the old railway terminals, yeah, especially for the haulage, for the traffic, not for personal traffic, they are being converted to basically just to the living areas. So let's say the metabolism of the city, yeah, the possibility to have, let's say, different modes of transports, to have maybe even production in, let's say, future again in a city. These are now being kind of slowly destroyed. So whether you see it as a problem, and whether you have any comments. Thank you.
Any comments from the panel on jobs and the metabolism of the city?
very easy questions at the end. I think maybe this, to transform the city, the day-to-day life in city, I said is easy because I wanted to take an optimistic view. The whole transformation is an enormous task. And there's one thing we really need for that. That's what we've got in our minds. Fantasy, innovation, technological progress, and I think this happens in cities, where people come together, invent something. Also the iPhone, as it was said, was invented in an urban region, although it's produced in China. So we need a lot of products, ideas and services, how to manage this enormous focus the world will face when there is a stagnation or a reduction in. If we want to have it peacefully, if we don't have it peacefully, and there are unfortunately a few arguments that this transformation wouldn't be smooth, then it's another discussion.
Any other comment? No. So I say thank you for joining this session.